Welcome to Meet the Author. Our featured author this month is Helen Bradley, who brings us her debut novel, Breach of Trust. This is a story that combines murder, political corruption, domestic abuse, sexual harassment. Quite a combination for a must-read. Let's start with our conversation with Helen. And let's begin by telling everyone what they can expect in the pages of Breach of Trust.
Well, Breach of Trust is my debut novel. It is set in Savannah and Tybee Island, and it's about a woman who works at the courthouse as a crime victim advocate. She is thrown into a tailspin when her young male employee accuses their boss, the district attorney, of sexual harassment. Should Anne speak out, go public, and lose the career that she's loved for so many years? Or should she remain silent? So she's definitely thrown into a dilemma. And there's a backstory and all sorts of interesting events that happen in between.
Okay, now, interestingly, the main character, Anne Gardner, who I love, I want her to be my friend, she has the same career that you successfully held for 27 years. So I'm sure you've been asked this more than once. Is this something that has shadowed your experience in Breach of Trust? Are we seeing that, or did it almost get in the way of that?
This book absolutely is inspired by true events. I was the director of the Victim Assistance Program in the District Attorney's Office for 27 years. In fact, a young employee accused our boss of sexual harassment. I then fictionalized the story. So a whole lot of it is made up, but it is certainly inspired by true events, and the plot is, I lived some of it, to be honest with you.
Now, talking about that plot then, when you look at this, could you have written Breach of Trust had you not had those career experiences? Or did sometimes the real part of your experiences sort of get in the way of what you wanted in the book?
I could not have written the book without my real life experiences. So I definitely used my memory and the work that I did for many years to create and inspire this book. So there's no doubt about that. And of course there's some crime victims in the book, and people say, is that a real crime victim? It's a compilation of several folks.
I bet you've seen a lot, enough to make a million compilations.
Yes, indeed.
Now, continuing on that idea, so as this was a debut novel for you, did you find, was it easier for you to have the plot drive you to that finish line, or the character development?
I believe I would say it was the plot, because I had to figure out, I knew what had happened at the beginning, but I had to figure out what was going to be the arc of the story, the ending of the story. So I love my characters, don't get me wrong. I love Anne Gardner, I love her friends who are so fun and wacky, but this book is plot driven, with hopefully strong characters though.
Okay, I want to talk about those characters. You have surrounded Anne with this strong group of females. I mean, it just ends up, I don't want to give anything about the book away, but we see those characters continue to develop. I was surprised with. Now, tell us more about that. Did they come from your past experience? Were there some compilations there?
There were some compilations. Definitely, Anne Gardner has wonderful female friends, many of them who've worked at the courthouse, and they're both based on my friends. I could not have survived some tough professional and personal times in my life without my friends. So quite a tribe we have, and it's Women's Month, International Women's Month.
Right.
So it's an important time to remember our very strong female friends.
Now, Anne herself is quite a character, and this book has many dark moments that really touch us. But she brings some light into it, partly because she herself seems to be reinforced by strong relationships with her husband and her friends, and second of all, a great sense of humor. Love the naughty little sense of humor sometimes. Is that how you coped with the reality of your job?
I don't think I had quite as much a sense of humor as Anne. I would like to be more like Anne, but I certainly had the strong friendships and family, my sister, my husband, my dear, dear friends. I couldn't have made it without them. So, but I aim to have more of a sense of humor. So that's sort of a goal.
I have to ask, the Snicker bars helped her too.
Oh yeah, chocolate. Now I am definitely a chocoholic, just like the main character in Breach of Trust.
So that you gave
no
her,
doubt.
You're sharing that in common. We're going to know
yes.
that, and the sense of humor you're going to work on. Now, you're not new to writing as a professional. You've written articles, you've written essays. What was the nudge to novel?
Yes. Well, there were two things. After I left the district attorney's office, I started volunteering with a program that mentors middle school students in their writing. And another volunteer and I would go once a week to the middle school, and we would encourage them to be creative. We didn't teach grammar and punctuation. They got that in school, but we encouraged their creativity. You know what? Those young people told difficult stories. They wrote their hearts out, and they inspired me to do the same. One summer, the volunteers were offered an opportunity to participate in writing groups. It was either poetry, nonfiction, or fiction.
Okay.
Well, I chose nonfiction because that's what I'd written. I had been a newspaper reporter for a couple of years and done some magazine essays and written grants. So at the end of that summer, I wrote an essay about the true event of a young man coming to me and accusing the district attorney of sexual harassment. Everybody in that group said, "Helen, we want to know more." Some of them knew about it because it had been in the media.
Okay.
But they said, "We want to know more. Please write this story." And I was like, oh, I've never written anything this long. And I knew I had to fictionalize it. So I made up a whole lot of stuff. But Breach of Trust is inspired by true events. It's inspired by middle school students. And also I have a writing critique group that I could not do without. They helped me create this novel.
Okay, now this is a very successful, such a good read. What's next for you as an author?
I hope to write another book, and I am right now debating exactly the plot. So some people want me to do a sequel to this. I don't know about that, but there's going to be another book, and hopefully it won't take me as long because it took me years to write this one. And by the way, this book was published 2 weeks after my 64th birthday. So we are never too old to follow our dreams and do what we want to do.
And that's a motto now for Sun City, of course, active aging. And
Oh.
I think and we have to say, you became a sort of a parent later in life.
I did.
And you're also a wedding officiant.
I am. Savannah Simple Weddings. I officiate little weddings and have fun doing it.
I don't think you're going to be sit still for a long
No.
time. Now, I'm not going to let you leave this conversation, though. I think we should let everyone know that while you've left that career with victims assistance, you have not left your heart. Your heart is still there with those victims. So I need you to tell us about Safe Shelter and how you help them.
Oh, so Safe Shelter is an organization in Savannah, Georgia that helps victims of domestic violence. They obviously can provide shelter for families, but they also do provide other services such as outreach, such as helping through the legal system, that kind of thing. So Safe Shelter is in my book, Breach of Trust, because there's a domestic violence victim. And I donated a couple of books for their fundraiser. And then I was honored and just touched when someone at Safe Shelter said they had a woman call saying she wanted to volunteer at Safe Shelter because she had read Breach of Trust. And you know what? That's what it's all about. I'm not John Grisham. I'm probably not going to sell 1 million books, but I can tell you, touching people and helping people to understand crime more and want to be of service, that's all. I came home, I told my husband and my sister, I said, you know what, if I don't sell another book, I'm happy.
And how does Anne end the book? And it's the light. What is the line? It's the
I
light in the
cannot
world.
remember.
Yeah, and that's the light in the world.
Yes.
And that's
yes.
you. So thank you so much
Oh,
for sharing
thanks for
this.
having me.
We're ready to hear your presentation. I'm excited to hear what all of the audience is going to think.
Well, I'm just so grateful to be here today. Thank you. Just a teeny bit about myself. I am a native of South Carolina. And can y'all hear me? Yes. Okay, because I feel like I'm holding it too close. I'm a native of South Carolina. I grew up in an itty-bitty town northeast of Columbia called Bethune. I will give you $1 if anybody's heard of it, other than Jerry and Susan. No dollars. Okay. And I did, as Denise said, work for many years as the director of a crime victim assistance program in the district attorney's office in Savannah. And people other than these two ladies who are victim advocates from other states and know exactly what I'm talking about, it's simply a program that helps victims through the criminal justice system. So we're not lawyers, but we're people who provide information, referrals, support, kind of hold their hand through the criminal justice system. And of course, in South Carolina, y'all call them solicitors, not district attorneys. This is my debut novel, Breach of Trust. The cover is, anybody know what it looks like? The Talmadge Bridge in Savannah. So it is set in Savannah and Tybee. It is about a woman. The main character's name is Ann Gardner. And Ann Gardner works at the Crime Victim Assistance Program in Savannah. She is thrown into a tailspin when her young male employee accuses their boss, the district attorney, of sexual harassment. Should she remain quiet? Or should she try to protect that young man and other perhaps future victims by going out and speaking out publicly against the district attorney? But if she does that, she'll probably lose her job and who knows what will happen. So she is a mess. She's in a very difficult situation. Things are further complicated because there's evidence that some of the district attorney's wrongdoings have helped cause a murder of a young mother. So that makes things even worse. So, while this book has all sorts of tough topics like sexual harassment, domestic violence, political corruption, it does have some humor in it. And Georgia was talking about how she loved the humor because the main character, Anne, is pretty zany, and she's got a group of wild and woolly, wonderful friends who help her through this whole process. So she's got her family and she's got some friends. So there are fortunately some laughs, and I love it when somebody texts me and says, I just laughed out loud on page whatever, 143. It was so funny. So that's what the book is about. And I'm not going to give away any spoilers about the ending or anything. I'm going to tell you how the book came to be. If you want to, I'll tell you a little bit about my writing and publishing journey, and then we'll have time for questions. Does that sound like a plan? Perfect. Okay. So I had worked at the newspaper at college. I went to Clemson University, so I loved writing. I did some writing of essays, some magazine articles, nothing big. Of course, I wrote grants, as you all know, that you have to do if you run a victim advocacy program. But it wasn't until I started volunteering with a program that mentors middle school students in their writing. So every week, another volunteer and I would go to the middle school after school and work with kids and encourage them to write, encourage them to be creative, and encourage them to tell their stories. And they were powerful stories, let me tell you. Those kids helped inspire me to write. I thought, if they can do this hard stuff, I can do this hard stuff. Well, one summer, this program let the volunteers go participate in a writing group. They said, you're not working during the summer with the kids, so come join a writing group. There were 3 writing groups. One was poetry, one was fiction, and one was nonfiction. Well, I chose the nonfiction because all I'd ever written was newspaper articles and some little magazine essays and some articles about my grandchildren, that kind of thing. So I chose the nonfiction one. On the very last session of that writing group, I wrote about the time in real life when a young man came to me and accused the boss of sexual harassment. Some of the people in the group were familiar with it because it had been in the news. So this book is inspired by true events. It is fiction. I made up a whole bunch of stuff, but it is definitely inspired by true events. So people in that writing group said, Helen, we have to hear this story. This is very interesting. And I was like, okay. So a few of us in that big writing group broke off, and 4 of us every single Wednesday morning get together and critique each other's writing and help each other out. This book would not exist without that writing group. I can tell you that. I mean, they even came up with the title. They're just fabulous. So we get together every week, we talk about each other's writing, we encourage, and mainly it kept me accountable because you've got to have some writing if you're going to go to a writing group. You've got to turn in some homework, so to speak. So they have been extremely supportive, and I could not have done it without them. So that's kind of how the book came to be. It took me years, off and on, 10 years I worked on this book. I didn't know how to write a novel. I only knew how to write short stuff. I went to workshops, I went to classes. I just did all sorts of stuff to learn about writing a novel. And also I was lazy at times and didn't stick with it as much as I should have, to be honest with you. So that's sort of how the novel came to be, inspired by true events. The first question people in Savannah ask me is, how much of this is true? Who is that on page 92? You know, it's a compilation of people. Some of them are made up, and some of them are based on real people. So the courthouse crowd just went crazy, you know, figuring out. I was getting my hair cut yesterday, and this one was like, oh my God, that book. I figured out who everybody was. And I'm like, yeah, I bet you did. So I made up a whole lot of stuff. The other question I get is, what does the district attorney that is loosely based on have to say about this book? I have no idea. I haven't heard from him. I talked to a lawyer before I did the book, and I made him so different. Plus, you know, if you're a public figure, you're kind of out there in the public, right? I mean, so I haven't heard a word from him, so that's a good thing. The publishing journey was really hard. Do we have any writers in here? I bet y'all got, I wondered if you were a writer. What do you like to write?
Fiction.
Yeah, like novels, short stories?
No, novels, yeah.
No, well, there you go. What is your name? So we'll remember that we knew you when you were not famous yet.
Dennis Stimley.
Stimley, Dennis Stimley. Okay. Anybody else like to write? Yeah? Only what? Christian, okay. Okay. Well, anyway, it's really hard to get a book published, and there's the traditional route where you try to get one of the big publishers, Random House and all that. I decided I would first try to do that, so I sent off, you get an agent first, or you try to, and then they try to sell the book to the big guys, to the publishers. I did that a couple of months, sent lots of letters, got a few rejections, didn't hear back from some. And then I heard about Moonshine Cove Publishing out of Abbeville, South Carolina, had published someone's debut novel. So I got in touch with them, and he offered to do my book. And I am going to be perfectly honest, there have been a lot of challenges. Here's an example. The first copies of my book came out with tons of errors in them, typographical errors, grammatical errors. My mother in heaven, the English teacher, was not happy. She was not happy. He had not submitted all the corrections that I had submitted to him. It was embarrassing, but what do? It finally got corrected. And now, do you want to hear a really wild story? You ready? Finally, most of the corrections are in. People are calling me up from the bookstores going, oh, we need more of your books. And I'm like, yay. So I ordered 100 books to take around locally in Savannah to various places. Got the books. Was going to my writing group that morning, so my husband shoved a box of books in the trunk of my car. I go to my writing group on Wednesday morning. I go to the coffee shop where they had asked for the books, and I open up the box, which I had not opened the night before. I open up the box and I pick up the book and I said, that seems skinnier than my book. Maybe he used a different type font. But I grabbed up some books. I go into the coffee shop and they say, Helen, "Don't forget to sign the books you leave." And I said, "Okay." I opened the book. It's someone else's book in my cover. Yeah. How does this even happen? Y'all, I just picked up the books and said, "Oh, I'll come back later." I got in the car. My heart was racing. I was saying really bad words. I had to go to the bank for something, and I made no sense because I couldn't even think straight. I just had to leave there. I get home. My husband says, "Well, let's go look at the other boxes and see what they look like, because that couldn't have happened, Helen." And I said, "Well, it did." All the books were the same. What happened, the book that he published the month before mine, he had her book inside my cover. I don't know if it was his fault or Ingram, the distributor's fault, and the printer's fault, but I was not happy. Anyway, I emailed the publisher, and then I got some corrected books, but it's really embarrassing when you go to a book club, which I love to do, and somebody comes up and said, "Helen, this is somebody else's book in your book cover." Is that the craziest thing you've ever had? I went online to this group called Writers Helping Writers, where we just talk and share information. And I said, "Y'all aren't going to believe what happened." And I told them that story very briefly. And most people were horrified. Several people said, "Oh, I've had that happen to me." One woman said, "I'm a librarian, and we got a children's book with a cookbook in the middle." One guy said his book came out, page 300 was at the beginning and page 1 was at the end of the book. Print on demand. So unlike John Grisham, they don't print out thousands and thousands of books of mine. They wait till people order them and then get the books. You see what I'm saying? So anyway, it's been a wild journey. I have learned a lot. I've learned how supportive people in this area and Savannah are. I cannot tell you how great it's been. I mean, I had 100 people come to my book launch. I was just overwhelmed, ran out of books and wine. So I guess that's a good thing. Let's see. I've had local media that's been nice to me. One reviewer called it a beach read with a bite. So it's a beach read with a bite. I love that. And there are many ways you can help new authors like me. One of them you're doing right now. You have come to this event and let me babble on about my book, and I appreciate that. If you want to follow me on social media, I have business cards up here that I would love for you to follow me. I've done a good job of getting the book out in this community, but I don't know how to get it out internationally. So all your family and friends in Connecticut and Indiana and New Hampshire and Pennsylvania, tell them about my book or put it online or send them a book or something, because that really helps. Also, book reviews are invaluable. Amazon and our Barnes & Noble, it helps change the algorithm, which means it helps me sell more books. So it can be one sentence, but that is a good way to help support a newbie author. It took me almost 10 years. But that's ridiculous. It shouldn't take that long if you put your backside in a chair and in front of the computer and get it done. But it took me almost 10 years because remember, I didn't know what I was doing. So that's crazy. But I would like to say this book came out last April, 2 weeks after my 64th birthday. So you are never too old to follow your dreams or you do what you want to do. I mean, that is a fact. So go for it. If there's something you want to do, do it. There's a chapter I want to read, but I don't know if I can find it quickly enough. Let's see. All right, so we're just going to read the beginning, okay? Does that work? Yes. All right. A white moon shimmers over the Atlantic as Anne and John sit on the deck of AJ's seafood restaurant. A perfect night. Happy anniversary, Anne says as she raises her Heineken bottle in a toast. John leans closer. Here's to many more, darling. Anne's cell phone buzzes and John rolls his eyes. Ignore it. But Anne can't resist looking. It's Lisa. She's working at the ER tonight. Must be important. She puts the phone to her ear. Hey, Lisa. I hate to bother you after hours, her friend Lisa says. I'm the charge nurse tonight. We've got a pregnant woman whose husband beat her up pretty bad. She has no family here. Can you please come see her? No, I can't. John and I are celebrating our anniversary. You know the protocol. Call the police and they'll take her to safe shelter. Where's your social worker anyway? Swamped, full moon crazy here. I told the victim about the shelter, but she doesn't want to go. She's anxious to get back to her toddler who's with a neighbor. Anne, you're such a great victim advocate. You can always calm people down and help them think clearly. Anne avoids eye contact with John, who's drumming his fingers on the table. And then Anne says on the phone, Lisa, you know my program doesn't do 24-hour crisis. Besides, it will take me nearly 30 minutes to drive from Tybee Island to Savannah. Lisa talks fast. I know, but he punched her in the face and stomach. She could lose the baby. We need to monitor her for a while. I'll owe you big time. Where's your husband? Anne asked. They've arrested him. Ugh, my pager's going off. Will you please come to the hospital? Okay, just this once. Bye. Anne clicks off her phone. What was that all about? John asked. Lisa's freaking out about a domestic violence victim and wants me at the hospital. Lisa's a nurse. She shouldn't be freaking out. But she is. She has a soft spot for abuse victims. Remember, Lisa encouraged her sister to leave her husband, and when she did, he friggin' killed her. She's got major guilt. I know that, Anne, but it doesn't mean you need to bail out on our anniversary, for God's sakes. And we just started dinner. John stabs his flounder with a fork. Hun, would you get me a takeout box? Anne covers her plate with a napkin. John's blue eyes widen. I reckon so. He reaches into his pocket for his car keys and slides them across the table. Good thing we don't live far from here, since I'll be walking home. Oh, darling, I feel awful for leaving, but Lisa's always been there for me. It's not like I do this all the time, and hopefully I won't be gone long. I swear. I'll make it up to you. She leans over and kisses her husband on the mouth. John scowls. Anne, I wish you'd stop trying to save everybody. That's the first chapter, because Anne does try to save everybody. For those of you who've read it, right? So, Safe Shelter is our local domestic violence shelter, and it's featured in this book because there is a domestic violence victim as a character. And they had a big fundraiser back in October in the fall, and I donated a couple of books for the raffle, and so they were happy about that. And then about a month later, I get an email from a staff member at the Safe Shelter, and she said, Helen, I thought you'd like to know, we got a call today from a woman who wants to volunteer with domestic violence victims, and she wants to volunteer because she read your book, and she realized how important it was. Oh, I just melted. You know, and I told my sister, I said, if I never sell another book, it's things like that that touch me and make it worthwhile. So that was just, gave me chill bumps. I was very grateful.
With the new studio and lots of new residents, Sun City TV invites you to join our crew. Our growing technology presence requires enthusiastic creative volunteers as camera persons, editors, script coordinators, reporters, audio and visual support staff. No previous TV experience needed. Many of the volunteer positions require about 1 hour a week. Email us at suncitytvhh@gmail.com to learn more.